I stared at the email on my phone in disbelief. Subject: termination effective immediately. I felt the blood drain from my face as I read it again and again. It made no sense. I had just closed a $2 million deal the day before. A deal I had worked on for over 5 months. It was supposed to bring in a commission check large enough to finally pay off my student loans and put a down payment on a house. But now, my boss had fired me just one day before my commission was due to hit. No warning. No explanation. I had sacrificed weekends, skipped vacations, and even missed my mom's birthday to work on that deal. And now it was all being taken from me. Just like that. I sank into my couch, numb, when something caught my eye. A small line at the bottom of the contract I had with the company. It was something I had insisted on adding months ago. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It all started a year ago, when I joined Redwood Solutions. I had just left my previous job after it downsized my whole department. I was desperate to prove myself again. Redwood was a mid-sized tech consulting firm in Boston. Fast-paced, high-pressure, and known for rewarding closes. My new manager, Kevin Mills, was a flashy guy. He wore overpriced suits, talked way too loud, and loved to remind us he drove a Tesla. But to be fair, he seemed to like me at first. He even called me his secret weapon after I landed a medium-sized account just 2 months in. Then came the Franklin Group lead. The Franklin Group was a huge client. Multi-state operations, expanding into healthcare tech. It was the kind of deal Redwood dreamed of. I found the lead by accident, through an old college friend, actually. I worked late nights putting the pitch together, crafted a custom integration plan, and met that team 3 times in person. It wasn't easy, but I was getting somewhere. Kevin barely seemed to notice. He was too busy chasing some startup deal that ended up falling apart. When I told him Franklin was interested, his attitude shifted. Suddenly he wanted updates every day. He started joining my calls uninvited. He even took credit for the initial idea in one company-wide meeting. But I didn't mind. I was focused. I knew if I could close this, it'd change everything for me. By month 4, the deal was near the finish line. Franklin's execs loved the proposal. Legal teams were involved. Kevin was now acting like he was running the show, but I still kept copies of every email, every signed draft, and even meeting notes where my name was listed as the lead rep. Then one Friday morning, I got a call from Franklin's VP. "Congrats, Jason," she said. "We're signing next week. You did great work." I hung up, heart pounding. I sent Kevin the update. He didn't reply. Not that day, or over the weekend. On Monday, I came into the office, and everyone was weirdly quiet around me. I brushed it off. Then Tuesday, I got the email. No in-person meeting. No phone call. Just, "Your employment is terminated effective immediately." Security was already notified. My access to the building was revoked. I was stunned. And that was when I remembered something. That one little clause in my employment agreement, the one Kevin had scoffed at when I insisted it stay in. The one sentence that could change everything. I picked up my phone and dialed. Not a lawyer. Not HR. Just one call. And everything would change. But first, I had to remind myself how I even got to that point. How I let myself trust Kevin. And how, somehow, I knew deep down that this company would try something shady. That's why I pushed for that clause. Back then, I had no idea how important it would become. Let me tell you how it all began. When I walked out of the office after being fired, my mind was racing. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just stunned. The words were still ringing in my ears. "This isn't personal, Jake. It's just business." That's what Matt said. Cold. Empty. Like I hadn't given 10 years of my life to this company. I sat in my car for what felt like an hour, just staring through the windshield. The deal, my deal, was set to close in less than a week. My commission, around $120,000. I had lined up that client from scratch, nurtured the relationship, traveled out of state 6 times, and even missed my sister's wedding rehearsal to land it. I texted Amanda, my wife, just 2 words, "It happened." The reply came seconds later. "Come home." I drove home, my thoughts tangled. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It was the betrayal. For years, I had passed up job offers, stayed late, covered for others, and even trained Matt when he was a junior rep, and now? He fired me. Amanda was waiting at the door. She hugged me tight and whispered, "We're gonna be okay." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything. And then I remembered something. Something very important. I still had a copy of the initial contract. The one with my name on the originating documents. See, in our company, if you're the originating rep and the client signs your name as the point of contact, you're locked in for commission, even if you leave. Unless you sign it over. Which I hadn't. Matt probably didn't even think about it. The next morning, I called the client, Dylan Harris. We had a great relationship. He picked up on the feist ring. "Jake, was just thinking about you. We're excited to sign next week." I cleared my throat. "About that, I don't work at Titan anymore." There was a pause. Then Dylan said, "Wait, what? Since when?" "Yesterday. Fired." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would change everything. "That deal doesn't go through unless you're paid. Let me make a call." I had no idea what he meant, but I had a strange feeling. Maybe the tides were about to shift. Later that afternoon, I got a call. Not from Dylan. From Titan's legal department. The woman on the line sounded nervous. "Mr. Evans, would like to discuss your commission agreement in the Harris deal." I played dumb. "Oh, I thought I was fired." "Yes, but the client has made it clear they won't finalize anything unless you're compensated." I almost smiled, but I wasn't going to let them off that easy. I told her I'd get back to her after I spoke to my attorney. The truth was, I didn't have one, yet. But I wasn't bluffing for long. Amanda helped me connect with her friend Grace, who was a contract lawyer. Grace was sharp, direct, and surprisingly kind. I emailed her the documents, and she called me back just an hour later. "Jake, you've got them in a corner. You originated the contract. The client's refusing to close without you. They fired you in bad faith, clearly to avoid paying the commission. We can fight this." It felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater. For the first time since losing my job, I felt like I had power again. Over the next few days, Grace started building a case. Emails, contracts, timelines, everything. And the more she uncovered, the more obvious it became that Matt had done this deliberately. Meanwhile, Titan was panicking. Dylan was holding off signing, and apparently, the board wasn't happy. I heard from an old coworker, Emily, that Matt was getting heat for the delay. "You should have seen him today," she said in a whisper over the phone. "He looked like someone just told him his house was on fire." I wanted to laugh, but I kept my cool. And then came the letter. Certified. Signed. Official. Titan offered me $40,000 as a goodwill payment to resolve the issue. I laughed. Grace told me, "This is them admitting guilt without saying the words. We can get 6 figures or more if we take this forward." I told her to do it. And then, just as we were preparing the lawsuit, something else landed on my desk. Something I wasn't expecting. An email from a major competitor. Subject line, "We'd like to talk." And that's when things really started to turn. Because the person reaching out used to work at Titan, and he had a story to tell. One that would blow everything wide open. When I saw Claire step into the cafe, I didn't know whether to be terrified or relieved. Claire worked in legal. Not just that, she was a legal director for our entire region. Sharp, always calm, and definitely not someone who wasted time. If she showed up somewhere, it meant something big was about to happen. She sat across from me, placed a small folder on the table, and didn't waste a second. "Jake, I've heard what happened. I need to see everything." I blinked. "You already know." She nodded. "We had internal alerts. When a manager overrides our commission protocol and terminates an employee without following the escalation protocol, it gets flagged. But the system didn't show your name, it showed only the department-level code." I did some digging. I passed her the flash drive and watched her plug it into her laptop. Her face didn't move an inch as she clicked through the files. The longer she read, the tighter her jaw became. 3 days before you were due your commission. That's a $120,000 bonus. On paper, the timing makes this look like constructive fraud. she said, her voice low. And he signed off on the sale himself. What does that mean for me? Claire looked at me. It means you might have a strong wrongful termination case, but that's not the part I'm most interested in. She slid a paper across to me. It was a service agreement, one I had never seen before, and my name was on it. This was drafted a week before your firing. Jake, they forged your e-signature. The system timestamp shows the signature was input 48 hours before you were even informed you were terminated. My stomach dropped. It was one thing to fire me before a commission. It was another to fabricate documents. That was criminal. Claire stood. Don't do anything yet. I'll escalate this, but I need time. In the meantime, stay quiet and stay out of sight. If anyone asks, you've gone on leave. I nodded slowly, not sure whether I felt empowered or just deeper in the hole. Claire left the cafe like she entered. No nonsense, no emotion. I stayed back, sipping my now cold coffee, running through everything. I hadn't just been fired. I'd been set up. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my old co-worker, Travis. Dude, something's happening, he whispered. Did you hear about Nick? My heart skipped. What? He's been locked out of the system. Like, everything. Email. CRM. Even his parking pass got revoked. HR isn't saying anything. The office is buzzing. That was fast. Claire didn't waste time. I stayed quiet for the day, watching things unfold from a distance. My social feeds showed pictures of the sales team in meetings, but no sign of Nick. I texted Claire a simple, need to talk. She called back almost immediately. Jake, can you come to the downtown office tomorrow morning? Bring everything you have. There's someone you need to meet. Who? She paused, then said, the general counsel. And the board chair. The next morning, I walked into a building I'd never been inside before. Downtown. Corner office. Glass walls. The works. Claire was already waiting in the lobby. She led me to a boardroom, where two people sat in silence. The older man introduced himself as Robert, chair of the board. The woman beside him was Ava, general counsel. Claire sat beside me, opening her folder. Mr. Mitchell, we're aware of the situation involving your termination, Ava said professionally. We want to hear it from you directly. I explained everything. From the work I did on the deal, the commission I was due, the flash drive, the forged document. I held nothing back. When I was done, Robert leaned forward. And if given the opportunity, he asked, would you be willing to return to the company? I didn't know what to say. My head was spinning. Under what terms? Claire smiled slightly. Let's just say, ones where you don't report to Nick anymore. But before I could respond, Ava slid a paper across the table. In the meantime, Jake, we'll need your help for something else. You might be asked to testify. Nick may not be the only one involved. My hands were trembling. As I reached for the paper, the door suddenly burst open. Nick stood there, red-faced, breathless. You can't be serious, he shouted. This guy is lying. You're gonna believe him over me. I froze. Robert didn't even flinch. Nick, we were hoping you'd come. We have a few questions for you. Starting with this. He lifted the forged contract and held it in the air. Nick's eyes went wide. He stepped back, and then he ran. Right out of the boardroom. Right out of the building. And right into the next big problem he didn't see coming. Nick stormed out of the boardroom, his leather shoes slapping hard against the marble floors as he muttered curses under his breath. He didn't even bother to look back. The image of all the executives, those smug faces suddenly turning pale, was burned into his brain. Especially Darren's. That was the face of a man who had just realized he wasn't holding the cards anymore. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence fill the space. No one knew what to say. Lisa gave me a slight nod of support, and it was all I needed. The fear in their eyes was proof that the tide had shifted. It felt good. After the meeting ended, I stepped into the hallway and took a deep breath. My phone buzzed. It was Steve, my attorney. They know now, don't they? He said when I picked up. They do, I replied, barely suppressing a grin. Time to file the paperwork. Already drafted. We'll file the lawsuit first thing tomorrow morning. I hung up, heart racing with excitement and nerves. This wasn't just about the $160,000 commission anymore. It was about principle, about fighting back against a system that thought they could discard people without consequences. That night, I met up with my old mentor, Paul, at a small bar downtown. He had been a sales legend in the company before retiring 2 years ago. I needed advice from someone who had seen the battlefield. "Heard what happened?" Paul said, sipping on his scotch. "Darren's always been a snake. But firing you before your commission, that's a new low." "He underestimated how much I know," I said, swirling the ice in my glass. "He thought I'd just walk away quietly." "Good," Paul nodded. "Because the only way to deal with people like Darren is to make them wish they never crossed you." The next morning, Steve filed the wrongful termination lawsuit, and news spread quickly. The company had tried to keep things quiet, but someone in legal leaked the filing to a business news outlet. It hit headlines by the afternoon. Emails and messages poured in from former colleagues, even competitors, expressing support and sharing similar stories. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Darren had screwed over. Then came the first blowback. The client who had signed the $2 million deal, a longtime connection of mine named Carlos, called me in a fury. "They told me you quit," Carlos said, "and that you left me hanging." "They lied," I said firmly. "I was fired the day before commission was due. I would never abandon a client like you." There was a long pause on the line. Then Carlos said something that made my stomach drop. "Then I'm pulling the deal." I blinked, stunned. "Wait, what?" "If they fire the person who built this relationship, then they don't deserve the deal. They can explain to their board why they lost it." He hung up. I stood frozen, phone still in hand. Carlos pulling out meant the company would lose not only the revenue but credibility with other clients. I didn't expect what came next. An hour later, Darren called me from his personal number. My screen lit up with his name. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. "You son of a," Darren began the moment I answered. "Save it." I cut him off. "You made your choice." Carlos backed out. "That deal was the quarter's biggest." "That deal was mine," I said calmly. "You just tried to cut me out." He growled through the phone, his mask completely dropped. "You want a war, you got it." I hung up without another word. The next morning, I was served a cease and desist letter. They accused me of interfering with company operations and stealing clients. Steve laughed when he saw it. "It won't hold up. It's just intimidation. They're panicking." But the pressure was real. I knew this was just the beginning. I had stepped into something bigger than I expected. The next few weeks would be a fight for my name, my career, and possibly everything I had learned. Then, 3 days later, I received an anonymous email. It read, "I have documents that prove Darren's been embezzling from the company for months. If you're serious about taking him down, reply with a yes." I stayed at the screen, pulse pounding. Do I open that door? Do I say yes? What comes next? "You're out." Effective immediately. Those words rang in my ears as I stood frozen in the hallway. My boss, Darren, the smug VP of sales who hated that I was beating him in every metric, had finally pulled the trigger. He knew my $2 million deal with Coratech was about to close. And he also knew I'd be getting a $150,000 commission. The biggest of my career. But just 2 days before the final contract was to be signed, he called me into a conference room, looked me square in the face, and fired me. No explanation. No warning. Just a printed termination letter and a security guard standing by the door. "You'll find all the necessary documents in this envelope," he said coldly. "Please gather your things." I took the envelope, but I didn't leave. Not yet. Because he had forgotten one small, crucial detail. You see, I had been with the company for 6 years. Long enough to know how deals worked and where all the skeletons were buried. And more importantly, I had a personal relationship with the CEO of Coratech, Carla Mitchell. We had met years ago at a conference, hit it off, and stayed in touch. I walked out of the office that day with my head held high. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask why. I just smiled, left the building, and made one phone call. "Carla. Hey, it's Evan. Got a minute?" That call set everything in motion. But before that, Let me tell you how I ended up in that hallway. I had joined Lincaric 6 years ago as a junior sales rep, hustling hard with no leads and a 3-month probation contract. I worked 12-hour days, made cold calls till my voice cracked, and studied every pitch deck like my life depended on it. Slowly, I built a name for myself. Clients liked me. Coworkers came to me for advice. I never missed a target. It wasn't easy. Darren, my boss, hated that I was doing so well. He always acted like my success was luck. Like I was just a smiling idiot with no real skills. I never let it get to me, though. I just worked harder. One day, I landed a mid-sized tech firm, Pinex. They were hesitant, but after weeks of meetings and demos, they signed a $600,000 deal. My first big win. That deal made Darren notice me, but not in a good way. He began micromanaging me. He'd randomly sit in on my client calls, criticize my follow-ups, and even take credit for my work in meetings. I gritted my teeth and endured it. Why? Because I love the job, and I believe good work always shines through. Then came Coratech, a billion-dollar firm looking for a complete tech solutions overhaul. When I heard about the IFP, I knew it was my shot. I stayed up for nights working on the proposal. Darren told me I was wasting my time. But Coratech loved our pitch. Carla told me I had something the other representatives didn't. Heart. She said I listened more than I talked. That I didn't treat them like a payday. We went through weeks of negotiations. I kept Darren in the loop, but I knew he didn't like me. He tried to insert himself into meetings, but Carla always requested only me. And then, boom, just before closing, fired. But that call to Carla changed everything. I told her what happened. She was furious. Evan, you're the only reason you considered Lincaric in the first place, she said. Let me talk to my team. I'll call you back. 3 days later, Lincaric got a polite email from Coratech. We've decided not to proceed with your firm. Best of luck. 2 weeks after that, I had a brand new job. Coratech offered me a role, VP of Client Solutions, with a salary twice what I made at Lincaric, stock options, and a seat at the strategy table. I also got to finish the $2 million deal, now under Carla's company. Darren. He tried to sue me for stealing the client. But he forgot to check one little thing. I had already reported his behavior to HR weeks ago. I had emails, notes from my meetings, and a record of every time he took credit for my deals. And since I never signed a non-compete, I was free to work wherever I wanted. HR launched an internal investigation. Darren was found guilty of multiple counts of misconduct and terminated. The cherry on top, the announcement of my new role was posted on LinkedIn the day after Darren's firing. One photo, one title. Evan Brooks, Vice President, Coratech Incorporated. 3 words exploded in his inbox, comma. Hits. Hard. The end. Subscribe for more interesting videos.